Hey Hatchlings, this is Christian of FireFeDragon, and thank you for joining. Overwatch, and its sequel Overwatch, is one of my favorite games of all times. It has a great cast of unique characters and an amazing approach to first-person shooter games by being very careful to explore many different play styles. There were supposed to be a lot of updates from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, and I'm critical of a lot of these changes, such as taking away some of the centricism around the RPG elements that I feel made Overwatch unique against other first-person shooters. There's also the over-reliance on having a good tank on your team. I'm very critical of that, and many of the other changes, which I will get to in future videos. However, one of the changes that I was looking forward to is the role passive. Just having this extra slider for the developers to help balance the characters in the game. However, particularly the damage role passive has had a very storied history in just the 4 months the game has been out. So how did they fail at creating a role passive so uniquely? Let's discuss and discover. To help us analyze what is wrong with the role passives as they currently stand, let's just go over what they currently do. For the tanks, they receive 30% less knockback, and when an ally heals them, the ally receives 30% less ult charge, and when they're damaged, the enemy gains 30% less ult charge. For the damage characters, when they receive an elimination, for a few seconds they get a, I think 30%, maybe it's only 20%, buff to how fast they reload, so it decreases their reload time. And for the support cast, when they are damaged, after 1.5 seconds of not being damaged, they start to heal for 15 health per second. So what is the issue with these different role passives? The tank one works fair enough, the healer one I have issues with, but it's functional. The main one that has been having issues is the damage roll passive. Previous iterations of the damage roll passive overbuffed characters like Genji by giving a reload increase as it currently does, but also a movement speed boost, which made flankers, particularly Genji, overbuffed. The current roll passive, I feel, buffs Ashe and Tracer a lot more than it does the rest of the damage cast, because they naturally spend a lot more time reloading, and so they're just getting more out of it. Additionally, I think that Hanzo doesn't technically reload in a way that is helped by this passive, and so we have characters getting overbuffed by it, and characters getting underbuffed by it, and so it doesn't really become a dial from which you can adjust the damage roll, it becomes a dial from which you can buff specific characters while leaving others in the dust. So how do we fix the roll passive issues? The problem with the roll passive is the broadness of the rolls, particularly the damage roll. You're trying to buff such disparate characters as Widowmaker and Torbjorn with the same buff. And sure, they both are helped by a reduced reload rate, but Ashe and Tracer, as I said before, spend more time reloading and get more out of it. The issue is treating different characters, these different moveset, different ability kits, as the same. Genji is helped more by a movement speed buff than Widowmaker, who is helped more by a longer damage fall-off range than Sombra, who is helped more by a damage boost based on how many times they've dealt damage in recent time. That is to say, no matter the effect of the role passive, whether it's movement speed, reload speed, or another effect altogether, it will always favor select heroes over the rest of the cast. It would be like giving Charizard, Venusaur, and Blastoise a role passive that increases water-type damage. Sure, it's technically a buff to everyone, but we all know Charizard is obviously getting the most out of that buff. So, how do we fix the role passive? We create sub-roles so that all the tank characters will be tanks, all the damage still be damage and support, but instead of giving all the damage characters the same passive, we hone in on specific subgroups to give them helpful but not over-buffed passives. Starting with the tanks, we have 3 subgroups based on the character's role in fulfilling the 3 tanks' purposes. Tanks are supposed to 1. Keep their team alive, 2. Control and fight for space on the map, and 3. Stay alive themselves. The first group are Protectors, Reinhardt, Sigma, and Ramatra. Just a quick note, I almost put Ramatra in the Bruiser category, but I think he gets buffed by the role passive for the Protectors better, and he has just enough Protector status while not having enough burst damage that he probably does fit the Protector role better. The Protectors, they focus mainly on staying alive and keeping their team alive with the use of barriers and protective abilities. Our next group are the dive tanks, so D.Va, Winston, Doomfist, and Wrecking Ball. They focus on controlling the map through disturbing the enemy position and getting picks on low health enemies. And the final group are the Bruisers. They have much more brute force approach to their tanking. They try to keep their team alive by getting early picks and controlling the map by scaring enemies off of control points like the payload or push spot. Roadhog, Junker Queen, Orisa, and Zarya are the Bruisers. The current tank passive has 2 parts, knockback resistance and resistance to giving ult charge. So I decided when creating the new tank role passive to pick one of the 2 and add a new effect for each group. So the Protector passive will retain the knockback resistance, but instead of the resistance to giving ult charge, the Protectors will get a speed boost based on recent mitigated damage. So let's go group by group and specify the specific role passives for each sub-role. The Protector passive. Protectors receive 30% less knockback and per 50 damage blocked or prevented, gain 1% movement speed up to a maximum of 20%. After a 1-second delay from the last time speed boost increased, lose 1% speed boost per 0.065 seconds. This was a difficult buff to balance. I used Reinhardt to balance this because I think he will get the most out of it, because he has the smallest attack range and has the most available and largest barrier. I also understand that 50 might sound like a very small number to get a 1% movement speed boost, but 50 times 20 is 1000, and Reinhardt's barrier is barely larger than that. So the enemy team almost has to coordinate to give Protectors the full speed boost. And they only keep the maximum speed boost for 1 second before losing almost 2% speed boost per second, which means that most of the time Protectors are barely faster than normal. This passive is meant to help Protectors flow through the phases of combat better. For Protectors, phase 1 is protect and position. So they put up their defensive abilities to keep their team alive to get that first initial poke damage in while they start getting in position to go into phase 2, which is attack and threaten. This is where characters like Reinhardt are doing most of their fire strikes, their hammer swings, and stuff like that. This is where they're trying to get damage and eliminations. During phase 2, you're trying to let your barrier regenerate and your protective abilities to come back online. And so you swap between the 2 phases as needed. Protectors are fine at doing phase 1, but can find it hard to participate in phase 2 because they need to close the distance to the enemy. This passive is designed to have them fulfill their main job, which is protecting their team, and then rewarding them by helping them flow into their secondary job, smashing through the enemy. The dive role passive. Divers grant 30% less ult charge when healed or damaged and receive a heal over time effect that lasts for 5 seconds based off of the blocked or prevented damage times 2.5 with a maximum of 40 heals per second, again lasting up to 5 seconds. This does not provide ult charge. The dive sub-role is in a unique bad position. Their identity is split between the 3 sub-roles, Protectors, Bruisers, and Dive. D.Va has a Protector cooldown, her defense matrix, a Bruiser cooldown, the micro missiles, and a Dive cooldown, her boosters. Each of the dive tanks is split between the same roles like this, which might sound like powerful versatility, but it really just means that they are a mess of mediocrity with abilities that don't support each other, without any niche or strength to leverage for their team. So I wanted to use this passive to help cement them into their dive identity. Similar to the Protector, dive tanks have a flow of phases. Phase 1 is infiltrating and disrupting the enemy position. Hopefully, you can get a pick while you're in the enemy position. Phase 2 is to retreat and reset. You get back to your team and make sure they are supported while they heal you and let your cooldowns come back online. One of the issues that dive tanks have is that they just don't have the sustain to stay within the enemy team long enough to be a threat. They need to be able to defend and face tank long enough to be a threat and then retreat. Dive tanks don't quite consistently have that. And so I want to reward them for doing their job, which is protecting their team through damage mitigation and subverting enemy attention off of their squishy teammates. And to reward this damage mitigation is a little more self-sustain. I don't think the dive tanks will get the max amount of heal over time very much, and the 40 heals per second may seem like a lot, but because of their large hitboxes and the fact that they've used their defensive abilities to get the passive going in the first place, I don't think this is too much. I think this is within a range of being balanced and just needs to be play-tested to finish the balancing. However, I think this self-sustain will give them just a little bit of edge they need to be in the backline of the enemy team long enough to fulfill the dive tank role. Hi, thanks for watching the video so far. I had a lot of fun making these sub-roles and the passives for them. And to help me out so that I can keep creating this content, go ahead and like and subscribe and ring the bell. Also, if you could share, that would be wonderful. I'm very excited to get back into making this content, and I'm excited to be hopping into the discussions around Overwatch. I love the game, want to help get into the discussion so that the developers have a greater chance of hearing this sincere love for their game and how we think we can, or they can improve it so that our sincere love gets multiplied. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, all that. Back to the video. Lastly, for tanks, we have the Bruiser role passive. Bruisers grant 30% less ult charged when healed or damaged, and for 3 seconds after they get an elimination, they receive 10% more healing from all sources and receive 5% less damage. The weakness that Bruisers have is a lack of protection. Sure, they all have some minor self-sustain abilities, but their tanking all comes from taking damage directly and eliminating enemy teams. This makes it important that they give less ult charge when healed or damaged, or they would just be ultimate batteries. And because they have large hitboxes and only minor ways to mitigate damage, they need to have some additional form of self-sustain. So I wanted to reward them for doing their job by adding a little more sustain, hence the extra healing and damage resistance. Like the other tanks, I wanted to reward the Bruisers for doing their job, and since they mitigate damage by eliminating enemies, thereby mitigating any damage that enemy would dish out otherwise, the trigger for this passive is getting an elimination. Moving on to the damage characters, we have the snipers, the controllers, and the flankers as the sub-roles. Since there are so many damage characters, I'll skip naming them all and just have them grouped on the screen with their sub-role. The sniper passive. Enemies within 15 meters deal 20% less damage to this character. The snipers have an odd set of weaknesses, where they kind of separate themselves from their team, and they happen to have relatively low escape mobility. And because of their focus on long-range play, they are weak to close-range threats. This makes it hard for snipers to escape. hard for your team, particularly the healers, to peel for snipers, and hard for the snipers to stand their ground. So I just wanted to add this passive to mitigate that conglomerate of weaknesses. The control passive. When they get an elimination, they get a 20% speed boost and reload 30% faster. This is the original role passive for the damage characters, and I think that it's quite fair for these characters. Enhanced reload speed helps Ashe and Tracer too much, and speed boost helps Genji too much, but none of the characters that reload speed or movement speed create a problem with are in this group, and it's a nice way to reward good play. The flank passive. When these characters are within 5 meters of a health pack, it reloads 30% faster, and once per life, reset when you get an elimination. Collecting a health pack will give 35 overhealth that lasts up to 10 seconds. The flank characters have a unique relationship with health packs because they are more reliant on them than the rest of the cast. Because of how they are played, they constantly break line of sight with their healers and therefore rely on health packs a lot. Since it's risky to do simple buffs like reload speed and movement speed, I decided to play up this relationship. I think that giving a small amount of overhealth is a nice touch, and limiting it to once per life reset on cooldown rewards good play without giving too strong of a flat buff. Just to make sure, I also limited the duration of the overhealth. I wanted to increase the spawn rate of health packs when a flanker is close, just to keep their uptime higher, which makes the game more fun since you are actually getting to play the game for a larger percent of time. I also had other versions where it didn't give the overhealth, but that kind of left Sombra with getting nothing out of this buff, since her hack is a much more stronger version already. So that overhealth, I think it's a nice touch and ensures that the entire flank cast gets something out of the buff. Lastly, we have the healers. Their 3 sub-roles are Totem, Agile, and Rescue. Totem healers try to select a point on the map and have a small space of control from which they throw out their healing and use their relatively high damage to ward off individual threats. The Totem healers are Brigitte and Zenyatta. The next group are the Agile healers. They follow the flow of their team more closely and use their agility to stay alive and jump from cover to cover or into positions where they can leverage threats against the enemy. Agile healers include Mercy, Lucio, and just barely Moria. Hi, I just want to give a quick note about my positioning with Moria here. That is, I wanted to get Moria into the Totem category because I feel like her positioning in a specific point of the map to throw out healing and to ward off threats with relatively high damage, I feel like that does describe a lot of good Moria play. I just wasn't able to reconcile her already high survivability with the role passive that I was giving the Totem characters, which also buffs survivability. And so I wasn't able to, it would, above 2 survivability would have been too much for Moria because she already does survive. So it would either be too much for Moria or not enough for Zenyatta and Brigitte. And so I moved her to the Agile, and I think she just barely fits into this. She would fit better if her cooldown for Fade was smaller, but again, she already has high survivability, and Fade is a large reason about that. And with how high she's able to jump and the movement that Fade provides, I think she can just barely fit in the Agile category. Finally, we have the Rescue healers. They have key cooldowns that suddenly mitigate an elimination. They also tend to be able to provide a constant drone of high healing per second, even without their cooldowns. Rescuers include Ana, Baptiste, and Kiriko. The Totem passive. The crit multiplier is reduced to 1.5 instead of 2, and whenever they receive an assist, they heal for 10 per second for 4 seconds, as well as receiving 10% less damage during that duration. The problem with the current Totem characters are that they have very low survivability for what they are supposed to do. Essentially, the rest of the healers have a form of mobility or invulnerability that give them the sustain that's needed for the team to peel for them, or for them to just duel and get to the elimination themselves. The totem characters are the ones designed to kind of plant themselves and survive. Brigitte is supposed to have extra health and armor and a barrier, and is still one of the easiest supports to kill. Zenyatta has some of the highest damage output from the healers, and extra self-healing through his shield health, but he's still one of the easiest support characters to kill. And so, this passive is just going to give them more sustain, which is central to their characters and their kits. The Agile passive. They deal 20% more healing to allies under 35% health. Mercy and Lucio have their weaknesses as healers. Mercy can only heal one target, a mediocre 55 heals per second, whereas Kiriko is closer to 70. Moira can heal a whole team for 70 to 105 a second between her mist and orb. Ana is 75 or more a second, and so on. Lucio can heal a whole team at a time, but only if they group up, and only by about 16 per second. Now, this has been proven to be enough for these two healers, particularly because of their consistency in healing. So I just wanted to help them feel like they're making plays or team-winning plays, big plays, more by giving them just a few more last-second saves for their team. The Rescue passive. Recover 15 health per second after not having been damaged within 1.5 seconds. This is a fair passive, and it's the current passive for all the healers. The problem is for the other healers, actually, because they all already have a consistent way of providing their own healing. Moira has lifesteal and her orb. Mercy has a heal over time passive. Lucio and Brig heal themselves with their Inspire and Sound boost, respectively. And so it's really just Ana, Baptiste, and Kiriko who have long cooldowns to heal themselves, or don't have a method to heal themselves outside of this role passive. So I think this is a fair passive for them, and I also think that it's fair to change the passive for the rest of the healing cast. Alright, and that's how I would fix the role passives in Overwatch. I would create sub-roles within the main roles, and give the sub-roles passives so that we can really hone in and give the characters more identity within those sub-roles. You know, we already use terms like main healer, off healer, tank, bruiser, and stuff like that. Widowmaker, Ashe, and Hanzo are naturally just snipers. Genji and Tracer are naturally flankers. So, and you know what? Overwatch used to do this. The damage role used to be a defense and an offense role. And so I think going back to having that better subdivision would help us really improve and hone in on the specific necessities of each kit so that we can experience the identity of dive better or the identity of flankers better. Let me know how you would fix the role passives, if you disagree with any of my specific sub-role suggestions. There was one or two that I kind of threw together to finish the video, but I think they all work. It's just that those two are a little bit weaker than the rest of the ones I designed. I'll let you decide which ones you think those are. Again, I think they all work, but I'd love the input for those specific two so that we can really improve the entire game. Thank you for watching my video. Go ahead and subscribe, ring the bell so that you can keep up with the next few videos I'm posting, with all the videos I'm posting, really. I have a lot more Overwatch content I'm going to be getting out in early 2023. And really getting into those conversations that need to happen about the game we love. Really work on trying to discuss with the community so that the developers can overhear how we need the game to improve moving forward. after these next few Overwatch videos, I'm going to start going into a more regular format for me where I talk about a lot of other topics, but a lot of this Overwatch stuff really needs to be said for the community and the developers. And yeah, like, subscribe, share, all that. And I'm going to end my rambling by saying this is Christian of FireFeDragon, signing out.